Hi, I'm Rachel,
And I'm Jamiah.
and this is our presentation for constitutional law, Twice as Hard, the fight to be the first female African American Supreme Court justice.
So, a little bit about Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was born and raised in Washington, D.C., to two grade school teachers in 1970, and she grew up in a Protestant middle class household, alongside her little brother Ketaj, who is also now a lawyer. They're 10 years apart, by the way. Justice Brown's father started off as a high school teacher and then became a lawyer a few years after Ketanji was born, and her mother was also a high school teacher and would later become a principal. So, of course, a core focus in their household was education. Justice Brown Jackson attended Harvard University for both her undergraduate and law degrees, and she's been married to her husband Patrick for the past 30 years, and they have two daughters together. Ketanji Brown's Ketanji Brown Jackson's resume is very extensive. So extensive that we cannot fit it within the time span that we were given. So, Dr. Rodriguez, if you'd like to pause the video, we would appreciate that very much. Um, but if that is all, we're going to move on.
Now, we would like to move on to a section we call Help, Hinder, or PR Stunt, featuring statements made by former President Joe Biden. Starting off with, if you have a problem figuring out if you're voting for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Biden said this on The Breakfast Show, a popular radio show, in May of 2020 when he was running for president. Also, during his 2020 presidential campaign, he promised to nominate a black woman to the Supreme Court. Now, why is this a problem, right? This left many black people feeling as if they were just numbers and statistics to get him into office instead of actual constituents that he was supposed to be serving. And even though it's common for presidents to nominate judges who align with their social politics, for example, Reagan nominating Sandra Day O'Connor as women rights were heightening, and former President Obama deciding to nominate Justice Sonia Sotomayor to the court as Hispanics were becoming the largest minority group. Jackson was met with unwarranted criticism for her nomination. This begs the question of if Biden played a role in it with the way that he set it up for her to be, be a campaign tool for him to be able to get into office, or if it was just misogynoir that was going to happen regardless, unfortunately.
So, a little bit of background with Jackson's nomination hearing. President Joseph Biden did appoint her to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit in 2021, and then he nominated her, of course, for as an associate justice of the Supreme Court in 2022. Primarily, she was characterized as an ignorant, unqualified DEI hire and dismissed by right-wing media and politicians. But she was publicly slandered and dismissed, not just by right-wing media and politicians, but people who didn't even know her. They'd hear sound bites and just assume that she was unqualified and ignorant and knew nothing, and that President Biden only nominated her because she was black. Jackson was confirmed by the Senate in a 53 to 47 vote in April of 2022, leading her to become the first black woman associate Supreme Court justice ever.
Now, moving on into misrepresentation of her skills. Now, at this point, we all know that she is beyond qualified to be Supreme Court Justice, but yet she has been forced to legitimize her legal prowess for right wing media and politicians to take her seriously. And this isn't something new. This is a very real phenomenon that happens to black women within the workforce and has been going on for generations. This discussion of black women having to overperform within the workplace is a topic that is commonly brought up within the black academic spaces, but not really outside of that. Justice Jackson's nominations hearing put this entire issue on a national stage, highlighting to Americans the day-to-day struggles that black women have to endure, constantly having to prove themselves within the workplace. The key takeaway from all of this is that even in high levels of power, black women are still having to prove their worth, oftentimes to individuals who are on a lower professional level than them, all because of stereotypes that have plagued our community for hundreds of years. And on this topic, I want to highlight something in the picture on the right. In the post where it says, "Why are we applauding composure during abuse? Why must black women suffer to make history?"
Some judgment by right-wing leaders in the media. Stephen Marshall, an Alabama attorney, wrote a testimony stating that her nomination makes him greatly concerned about the direction our country is heading in. The Heritage Foundation didn't support her and her claims, and claimed, that she wasn't qualified to be on the Supreme Court. And interestingly enough, the Heritage Foundation had also been financially connected to Clarence Thomas, who also thinks that Justice Jackson's race-infused worldviews fall flat at each step. But I wanted to highlight dog whistle politics. A lot of politicians use, from time to time, they tend to use subtle coded language to signal racial ideas without being explicit. After the civil rights movement, overt racism became less acceptable. So figures began relying on indirect cues tied to issues of crime or welfare. And this connects to Ketanji's nomination, where some criticisms were seen by supporters as using similar coded language rather than direct statements about race.
Now, moving on to the judgment from left wing leaders and media. So far, left wing media and Democratic politicians have strongly praised Justice Jackson as a historic and groundbreaking Supreme Court nominee. They've emphasized that she has brought long overdue racial and gender representation to the court, many highlighting her exceptional qualifications, including her judicial experience and background. They've also defended her against Republican criticism, which they viewed as unfair and politically motivated, along with many other things. Supporters consistently pointed out how composed and professional she remained throughout the hearings. Overall, the left framed her nomination as a major step towards a fair and more balanced judiciary.
So, despite all the negative, the American Bar Association rated Justice Jackson. They stated that the committee confines the evaluation to the qualities of her integrity, professional competence, and judicial temperament. Um, the standing committee of the unanimous opinion that Jackson is well qualified to serve on the United States Supreme Court. So the fact that the American Bar Association even had to clarify that, as if her extensive resume and her education didn't already say that enough, says a lot. Because you see, in times prior, justices that came before her didn't have to do that. So I figured that, that's interesting.
Now, in conclusion, we want to end off with an African American proverb: Black women have to work twice as hard to get half as much. Unfortunately, this proverb is echoed through the experience of Judge Jackson, as she has to constantly prove herself, and we've seen all that she's accomplished to just not even get even half of the respect that her fellow judges have received, even though she is working just as hard as them and has worked just as hard as them. And regardless of all the negative, she is truly blazing a path for Black women and girls to for this to no longer have to be a norm. But I still think that it's very important that we think about this poll and just reflect on how true this is for so many Black women throughout the workplace.
Thank you. And here are our references.
Yes.